Hi, Catherine Annis. So
Hi,
we're back
Marion.
for our next Wisdom Within, and I have to say we nearly didn't start because we had the fit of the giggles. But that's what finding wisdom, connecting, all of that doesn't have to be a serious thing, does it? So
Oh, it can be, yeah. Even when the subject matter is serious, we can be in service lightheartedly. So that's a beautiful place, I think, to to
absolutely,
acknowledge. To acknowledge. So, yeah, it's great to be lighthearted and to um, know that to know that you can find your own wisdom in that lighthearted space and that you can navigate the most difficult, challenging circumstances as a result of connecting with that inner wisdom. So,
mm,
you know, that laughter for me is sort of a byproduct of what we're talking about here,
absolutely.
every week, right? So,
Yeah, it is. And
yeah.
today I was talking to someone, and they mentioned that they'd really enjoyed our previous recording on passion and purpose, and
Yay.
which is great. And
Mhm.
I asked her, well, what would you like to know more about? And she said she would just like to hear stories of how other people have come to find themselves, to know themselves. And I
Mm.
thought that was a great thing because, we don't talk about techniques, that's for sure. We're not technique people. But what we
Mhm.
do have is lots and lots of stories that point people in a direction of who they really are. And
Mhm.
certainly, I went on that journey over 20 years ago. Well, over 40 years ago, sorry. I was trying to make myself sound younger.
Yeah.
and
Me too. Me too.
um, and yeah, I used to listen to the stories of the people that I met along the way, who told me about how they discovered this, this beautiful knowledge inside of themselves, and it always inspired me. And I remember thinking, oh, I want some of that. But yeah, I
Agreed.
had to find it my own way.
Mm.
So, how did you? Yeah, what were the ways that you searched for who you really were?
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I love what you just said. You just said I had to find my own way. And that can sound very vague, but something inside us knows the truth of that statement, that we each have a unique path that returns us to what I call wholeness.
Mm.
And, some people refer to that as healing. When I return to wholeness, I'm in the world in a very different way, in a much more empowered way. And for me, that's the healing journey, is a return to the wholeness that always exists within. So practically, what did I do along the way? There's a long list of things that I did along the way. But the most important thing was I learned to listen to my own heart. I learned to listen to what resonated with me and what was drawing me towards it. And I learned to honor that. And this is for me the most crucial piece that we can do as mentors or as counselors or as coaches or whatever our position or role is in the lives of our clients and people we care for and love, is we're really reconnecting them to that inner wisdom that we're talking about. It's our true nature, it's our essence, it's within each one of us, whether we feel connected to it or not. And many people do not feel connected to it. And Miriam, there's a little bit of, there's some magic here because what we're talking about is divine in nature. And so I needed, by the time I was in my early 20s or late teens, maybe mid teens, or maybe, oh gosh, maybe out of childhood, I had disconnected from my inner knowing, from the effortless sense of being in the world effortlessly as who and what I found myself to be. You know, all of that conditioning, I started to take it all on board. And I was completely detached from any sense of inner guidance or inner knowing. So the journey started, right? So I just was really unhappy and unfulfilled, and that carried on for a long time. But there was a spark inside of me. I would hear something, I would read a book, and it would light me up, Marion. It would literally light me up. I would feel enlivened. It would literally make me feel more alive because I'd started to feel very deadened and numb inside.
Yeah.
Um, so do you know, if you wanted me to list the practical things, I remember picking up a magazine and reading an article written by my first Buddhist teacher. Her name is Pema Chodron, and probably many people know who she is, but if you don't, she's just a modern day female Buddhist teacher. Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche was her teacher. He was one of the first Buddhist guys who came over and made a splash here in North America. But I read something in what she wrote about awakening to this inner vibrancy, to this inner essence. And it just lit me up inside. Now, this is just an example. I started to pursue, I looked for more from her. And that led me to reading, you know, Running with the Wolves by, have you read that one?
Yeah.
Women Running with Wolves. Okay. So all of these, one thing led to another very beautifully. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. My life was a freaking mess, Marion. Like I was just simultaneously, you know, I was getting into bad relationships. I was, you know, going from one job to another. I was a real seeker for you know, I was like, "Are you kidding? Is this it? What? We get an education, get a job, get married, buy a bunch of stuff and die?" You know, that just didn't make sense to me. So while I was, you know, doing the things that we all do, getting into relationships and, you know, a couple of bad marriages, there was this inner life that was making itself known to me, that I was
I love
learning,
that.
yeah, and I was learning to
Yeah.
cherish it. And I was learning to follow it over the outside things that were requiring me to abandon it. And you know what I mean by that? It's like,
Beautiful.
okay, right. So, right, I got chills just saying that
It's so
because
true. It's so true, Catherine, because the most you've said everything is profound, but the most profound thing you just said just then was that when you were started seeking and you started listening to things that resonated with you. So I met somebody who became my mentor. She said lots of things that just resonated with me. I then discovered Caroline Mace, and
yes,
I read and listened to everything that she did. And everything I read, it was like, oh my God, I know this, I know this.
me
And
too. I couldn't list them all, but when I hear you speak, it's like, yes, me too, me too,
yeah,
me too. All of these people were
it's
saying things that were
beautiful.
waking things up within.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the best thing was my life also was absolute shit going along as well. So it was, and if anybody thinks that they are going to suddenly get enlightened in an immediate moment, I'm sure somebody has in the world, but most people don't. That the journey of moving out of a place of who we've been taught to be
Yeah.
into the place of who we truly are,
Yeah.
it is a journey. We hate that word, but it is a road that we're going to travel along. And as you understand things more and more and more and more, that shit life suddenly starts disappearing behind you because you let go of things. So that's absolutely
Yeah.
true. And for me, the second thing was that I was incredibly aware of my shadow side. I owned it. I was willing to look at it. I accepted it. I could see it was just part of me, but I knew that there were things in there that I didn't want to do that anymore because it didn't feel right, but
Mhm.
I didn't know how to stop. So for me personally, and it's different for everybody, I just noticed it and decided not to be that person at different times. And then I sort of started changing. And I think, I don't know how you feel about that, but I think knowing our shadows and accepting them and being able to look at them is a good step.
I agree completely. And, those words can be interpreted in all sorts of ways. But I agree with you because a part of what I needed to do, like for instance, when I was growing up, my dad, bless his heart, was a really angry guy, um, a rager, so everything's going along great. Something happens and he explodes. And as a child, that's very frightening. In fact,
Mm,
it sometimes felt life threatening.
yeah.
So I only mention this because this is was a journey, a part of my journey back to wholeness. Everybody in the family, there were 5 kids and my mom, we all learned to do something other than express our anger outwardly because it wasn't safe to do that.
Yeah.
Dad got to do that. We didn't. We did something else. I became a very sarcastic teenager and very introverted and then very depressed because that energy of anger I was suppressing it, I was repressing it. So you never saw me get angry, you just never saw me again. I
Yeah.
just cut you out. I mean, I would just walk away, if I got angry, you just weren't a part of my life. Well, you can imagine, you end up being a very lonely, introverted individual if every time, anger threatens to arise, it wasn't the other person, it was that energy was arising within me and I was frightened by it. I was too afraid. I didn't know what to do with it. So that meant I had to
So
leave.
resonates. It so
Yeah.
resonates because mine was hurt. So I
Yeah.
went into my shell and withdrew and was quiet. And um, you know, if anybody hurt me, I would disappear because it
Yeah.
was such an overwhelming feeling.
Yeah.
Again, because I'd had it and I'd experienced it for so many years that yeah. So I recognize that a lot.
Right. So now, a part of the journey for me, my path, was getting back in touch with that energy,
Mm,
because I want to say this too. We can't be in this world and keep ourselves safe and be empowered if we don't have access to that energy that we call anger.
yeah.
Now, when it's suppressed or repressed, it can come out in very unhealthy ways
Mm,
because it had to be expressed.
yes.
For me, again, it expressed itself mostly in depression, severe depression for much of my adult life. I lived with a man for 5 years with a young child, my daughter. I was a single parent, and I'm actually in a relationship with this man. We separated for 7 years and got back together, and it's like a whole new relationship. But he only saw me get angry once, and it was getting angry at my daughter in terms of expressing that outwardly. Let me tell you, I was angry at him a lot, a lot. And the fact that he never saw it is an indication of my lack of emotional and psychological health and
Yeah.
well-being. And so I had to leave that relationship. And let me tell you, I was on my own journey. And when we met again, I was in touch with that big energy of anger. I'd done a lot of healing. So I was like a new person. Um, and so anyway, so when you talk about shadow work, those are the kinds of things that I
Yes.
think. And for me, this return to wholeness means that we have access to all of the emotional scale, you know. So the energy of anger, what I call anger, is utilized in a very healthy way these days in my life. It gives me
Mm,
it is the energy to make changes. It is the energy to create boundaries when someone is not capable of treating me with respect. I no longer hold it in and then blow up at them. I see it very early on, very clearly, and I make choices and decisions. I don't wait for them to change or be able to do it. So that energy now, it hardly ever looks like anger, Marion. It is this, it's a big energy and a feeling of empowerment. So I think when we do that shadow work, it's really miraculous,
Yeah.
because when those energies are integrated, there is a health and a well-being and a sense of being empowered in the world, and no longer being a victim. You know, people can victimize us and do things that are unkind towards us, but I no longer have a victim identity that I identify with. So it's like I'm with you all the way. And for me, I did all kinds of things, you know, but again, I started to listen to and honor the things that enlivened me, made me feel like I was coming alive again. And that led me to, I'd grown up with a lot of fundamental Christianity that was really fear based. I used to joke and say the study of Buddhism and Buddhist teachings was the antidote to that fear, because it was the opposite. It was everything you need is within you. You know,
Yeah.
the lotus flowers blossoming within, and they have a beautiful understanding of the mind. So then that led me to Reiki. It led me to studying yoga. It led me to all kinds of I trained to work in the social work field. Um, and everything was a piece of the puzzle for me. And then I encountered Byron Katie, and I went and did her school for the work, where I started to understand the role that thought played
Yeah.
in my life. Now, I want to say something really interesting that I found, because I would go down these roads, you know, for a certain amount of time. And then something within me would say, this is the end of this particular journey. Now, I had a negative inner narrative and I thought, what's wrong with me? Why can't I stick with something? You know,
I used to
well,
have that too.
yeah, it's just like, why am I only going so, why can't I be more committed to my yoga practice? Why can't I do breath work for, 20 minutes every day so I can, but you know what? I was actually I was going, no, simultaneous to this, my own wisdom was leading me to something that was right for me, and it was the three principles. It was this understanding of how our psychology is created, because for me, it gave me the missing link. It helped me understand how my own conditioning, like, I knew I was a spiritual being. I knew that there was a spiritual essence, but I wasn't living from that place consistently. I
Mm.
would fall into this really dysfunctional conditioned thinking that was full of fear and insecurity. And this particular understanding, spiritual understanding called the three principles, gave me the missing piece. I knew I was whole and complete within, but my conditioning would take me off track.
Take
So
you
I'd get
away.
glimpses of this beauty, and then I'd fall into ex- um, long periods of time where I was in the why did I do that? How could I have been so stupid? Look at another failure, and I learned, along the way, not to be under the influence of that negative inner narrative, and that there was a deeper wisdom. So I had my own path to reconnect to this divine essence within. And I just sort of laid it out there. But again, the critical piece was that I began to love and honor myself enough to stop listening to that negative inner narrative and to listen to the deeper promptings of my heart and my soul. You know, one time I knew, for instance, it was time to leave a job. I just didn't feel, it was starting to suck the life out of me, is how it felt, Marian. It just didn't feel nourishing to me on a really deep level. And I bumped into someone at the post office, So once I knew I'm going, no, my soul is saying it's time to leave. But there was nothing to go to at the time. Within the next week, I bumped into someone at the post office, and we just said hello, walked by each other. And then that person turned around and came back and said, now, I don't know if you would be interested in this, but XYZ is, I've just heard that this is available. Well, Marion, the important part of this is every cell in my body lit up. Like it was like a bolt of energy. I'm sure the person just saw a light bulb go on behind my eyes, because this was it. This was the door I was waiting, to open, and I walked through that door, and it was a beautiful, so that led me to the um next chapter in my own journey. And I came home to my partner John, and I said, "Oh, and he just looked at me and said, "I can't believe you're going to leave your job." And I looked at him, I said, "John, everything in me lit up. Like, this is the right next step for me." And he was beginning to understand that this wasn't a logical process. This was me coming to recognize my own inner guidance. And it was that this is lighting me up. There's a big inner yes to this. So that's just, Marion, that's what I learned to listen to. And the more I learned to listen to it, the clearer it was. So whether that leads you to working with a coach or a mentor, or reading the next book that's going to illuminate some area of your own life for you, again, the important part for me is to learn to listen to your own heart, your own inner promptings. And the more we learn to listen to that, the stronger and the clearer that guidance gets. That's divine guidance for me, by the way. I see it as divine in nature. And when we start to listen to it, we start to live into a realization of our connectedness to
Mm.
something larger, to the infinite, to the divine within and without. So all those synchronicities start to take place, and we find ourselves living in a state of flow. And it doesn't mean that challenges don't come up. They do, but we're no longer just relying on our intellect.
Mm.
We are really listening for that inner wisdom, and then stepping through the doors when they open. So
I think it's so true that when I look back at, over 40 years, there are many things that I've done. But most importantly, overall, it is about that when I've read something and it resonated with me, then I just sucked it in.
yes.
I just couldn't get enough of it. And that was because my whole, like you said, I was just lit up inside. Then I'd find something else and it did the same, or I met somebody and it did the same. And I had no idea where that journey was going to take me. It just took me down different little
Yeah.
roads and corridors, and doors opened, and everything started I started piecing this world together that made complete sense to me. And it didn't make sense to anybody else, and that was fine.
Yes, the outward journey might, you see, the outward world wants us to conform. Like, our conditioning
Yes,
wants us to conform.
yes,
So when we step out of that box, things align within. And then so again, it's sort of like the you might receive challenges, your friends, your family, the people who've known you, they might want you to stay in that box
yeah,
so that you remain familiar to them.
yeah.
But that's why I say I was learning to honor this inner prompting
Mm.
more than the external things that were asking me to stay the same. There were external
And
people.
it takes courage.
Yes.
I think it takes courage to look at yourself and to make changes, and to go down roads that other people haven't been down, that are around us.
And it
And
requires faith, because you will often only
yes,
get the next step. You
yeah,
won't get a guarantee, but you will have an inner knowing that this is the right direction for you.
yes,
Yeah, right?
absolutely.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I love that. And yeah, I definitely just knew that I was constantly moving and shaping and changing, and that trust, like you said, in allowing everything to unfold just as it needed to be. And I think in the earlier part of my journey, I wanted it all to happen now.
Yes.
Why is it not happening now? Why am I not feeling whole now? But as time went on and I had a deeper understanding of what was going on really in my life internally, I started learning far more about the flow and trust. They were the two biggest things that once I truly understood those and connected with those, that my life started unfolding even more. And I just let it happen. And then,
I love that. I love that, Miriam, because I hear some of my mentors like to say there's nothing that you have to do. And that can be misconstrued. Of course, we're living in this physical world, no matter how in touch with our spiritual nature we are. You have to do some stuff here. You
yeah,
have to, you have to bring in some money, you have to pay your bills. So there's a very practical, mundane part of life that requires some doing. Where what I've discovered about this, you don't have to do anything to be whole and complete.
yeah,
Although the healing journey, you see that our true nature isn't touched by the trauma we've experienced.
yeah,
Our essence isn't damaged.
mm,
Many of us have gone through some very, very horrendous experiences in life. And that can sound uh, ridiculous, but when we say there's nothing to do, for me that refers to your essence, your spiritual nature, your true nature, that part of you that isn't damaged by anything. And the wonder and beauty is that when you tap into that wisdom within, it is whole, it is complete, healing happens, and you have the guidance you need for any other kind of healing that you might need to do,
mm,
psychologically or emotionally, to really love and care for yourself and be
yeah,
compassionate. But you can tap into that inner wisdom. That inner wisdom is, in my opinion, divine, it's eternal, it's infinite, and that's what we mean. You don't That's within you, whether you have contact with it or not. It's
it's natural.
Yes, it is. It's there. It can never go away. It can never be damaged. And when you begin to tap into it, your life begins to blossom. Who you are emotionally and psychologically begins to blossom. And you realize that you can trust this inner guidance around what to do next.
Yeah,
The less you listen to that negative inner narrative, the more this deeper inner wisdom is going to make itself known to you and is going to guide and direct you. And in the meantime, find people you resonate with.
yeah,
You know,
definitely.
Marion, who did do you can you remember the people along the way, even when you felt lonely, who came along and supported you in your journey? And they don't necessarily know what you should do,
Yeah,
but they know that you have the capacity within you to navigate your journey and that we can support one another along the way.
yeah. So true. I've met so many people like that, and even people for short moments in time.
Yes.
Even I moved recently, and even moving and having some workmen here, it's some of those workmen without even realizing, actually they were so amazingly lovely. They supported me through this. It wasn't just a move, it was a real move that
Yes.
was physical as well as for me spiritually and mentally. So yeah, they you just meet people along the way. We do meet people, by the way, who really press our buttons. They
Yeah.
don't like us, they don't understand us. And you know, everybody we meet um, is an opportunity for us to see something within that helps us deepen and connect more to ourselves. So I didn't want to finish without sort of bringing that up. I think it's a really important thing for people to understand, because they don't understand why people don't like them sometimes, or why there's conflict, or why they meet the wrong guys or the wrong women or whatever it is.
Mhm.
But I learned really when I was much younger that there was a nugget of gold within all of those. It didn't feel like it at the time, but I always knew that there was something I was going to learn about myself.
I love it, Marion, and I have to agree with you because no, I'm not saying that, all of a sudden we get onto this path and everything is free of challenges and people magically show up to support us. I mean, they do, but also I agree with you. Everybody has a filter that they're seeing the world through, and that filter contains a lot of conditioning and a lot of
Yeah,
judgment. And I'll just say, the people who don't like me, the way they serve my growth is I learn to not need their approval. I love and respect myself enough that I can just move on from the people who cannot love and respect me. And
absolutely.
right? And it's like, I don't even expect them to. I don't expect people to like me or be able to relate to me. Um, some people do and some people don't. And you see, it's okay now, though.
Yeah,
It's okay now, where before I would take that in and make it mean something about me.
yeah.
Oh, what's wrong with me that
I'm
they
not
don't
good enough.
like me? you know?
Yeah,
So with this living from the inside out, where we're at home with ourselves and there's less of that conditioning, we attract the people into our lives, um, who can support us along the way, and again, sometimes the journey is very lonely, but there's something in that. Even there is this turning inward and finding our own inner strength and our own interconnectedness to everything around us. And in that, synchronicities happen, people come in, the next book, a video, now that we've got the internet. So follow your heart. If that sounds too impractical, that gets filtered down into very practical steps,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. Look for the things that illuminate you, whether it's books, people, things,
Yeah.
look for that
I
feeling.
yeah. I can remember someone named Daniel, what was her name? I'm not going to say her name. I might say it correctly, but she said, and other people have said this too. If you've got two choices, get quiet. Which choice lights you up?
Mm,
Which one feels heavy and burdensome, and which one lights you up and feels enlivening?
yeah,
Now, when I first heard that, that had never occurred to me that I'd have something within me other than my intellect, other than writing down the pros and cons and not really,
yeah,
feeling into which choice was right. So things like that really helped me along the way,
yeah,
because I think when we follow our heart, the burden is in our conditioning.
yeah,
When we tap into our inner wisdom and live from that inner knowing, it uplifts us in all ways. It uplifts our spirits,
yeah.
it uplifts the way we feel in the world. So I say go towards what feels uplifting or what enlivens you, what fans that little spark inside.
A
You can't
feeling.
go wrong.
I think we can often, when certainly when I was younger, I was frightened of many feelings actually, because they would become overwhelming and take me back to dark places. And nowadays, my feelings, I navigate through my feelings all of the time. When I feel heavy or angry, irritated, anxious, whatever it is, actually, where that heavy feeling that I have inside, it always, always, always now reminds me that I've just lost my mind a bit, that I'm
Yeah,
not seeing something clearly.
yeah,
And
yeah,
on the whole, and I'm human, so I do lose my mind sometimes, but on the whole, I'm willing to let that go now until I can see it more clearly. And
I
when
love
I'm
it.
on the other part of the scale where I feel expanded and light and glowing and happy, I know I'm going in the right direction. So if anybody is thinking, of a way of navigating, then they can start using their feelings, stop being frightened of them,
Yeah.
and start just noticing them because they're telling you something.
Yes, that Many of us, again, it's like, when I said earlier that by the time I was in my late teens, I felt numb. I felt really disconnected from my emotional
Yeah,
experience. And so
so was I.
allowing myself to feel was a really critical part of the
Yeah,
journey. And I realized that uh, it was also an indication of the quality of thinking that I had running
yeah.
through my head when I started to go down the path of my conditioned thinking that said I wasn't good enough.
The
Boy,
self-destruct.
that I could hold that darkness in
Yeah,
place. The world was still beautiful, but it wasn't beautiful up here.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I was living in a lot of darkness. So I agree with you. These days now, I'm a vessel man. Like feelings flow through me,
Mm.
like just constantly. And I can go through, sadness to and tears to joy and happiness. So there's a capacity to have the full range of emotional experience. And if I feel anger come up, I'm looking to myself to see what I need to take care of. I'm not projecting it out onto the world. I'm taking action in my life to correct something that is gotten out of that is out of balance is the way I would say it
Yeah,
today,
yeah,
right? And so all of that is welcome in my experience. And who we are in our essence is this flow of experience, and the clarity of wisdom can guide and direct us through
yeah.
the full range of emotional experience. So,
I remember the first time that sadness arose within me and I was able to watch it and
yeah,
accept and go, well, thank you. Okay, you want to come up today,
yeah.
and I can experience you without being overwhelmed by you. So I
Mm,
can observe you and experience you at the same time. That absolutely knocked my socks off because I
mm,
realized how far I'd come, that I was
ah,
able to welcome everything, because you're right, we are a vessel of all feelings and they are
exactly.
going to flow through us. So wouldn't it be just great to be able to notice them, experience them, and they don't have to mean the end of the world, which they do to a lot of people.
Oh, I can remember when I was a very catastrophic
Mm.
thinker. Like if I
Yes,
was angry, catastrophe was going to happen. There was,
yeah,
I had to, again, it was the fear of that emotional experience because I'd learned to be afraid of it. And no, now all of those emotions inform my experience. And
yeah,
there's this rich,
yes,
this rich tapestry of emotional experience that makes life rich and deep and meaningful. And I want to say something, it might sound strange, but even sadness contains beauty.
yeah, it does.
You know, yeah, right? So
It
there's this.
does. And until you experience that, you won't really know what that means. But I can tell you that any seeker will come to a point where they can see that, because that is true. It is a deep truth. So
When we love deeply, we feel deeply, we grieve deeply. All of those things are different
yeah,
sort of expressions of love, in my view, is what
yeah.
I've come to. It's like I
Part of
can
our
allow.
humanness
Yes,
as
yes,
well.
yes,
Mm,
yes. Yeah. And we can respond to it and honor it. And in that way, we don't become a pressure cooker.
mm.
We
Yes.
in that way things flow. The
Mm,
reason we're afraid is we were repressing and suppressing before until it had to explode. And
yeah.
so it looked like those big emotions were dangerous.
Mm,
When we can just meet them and allow them to flow through us, then life becomes a much more a richer, more
yeah.
graceful experience, regardless of what emotion we happen to be feeling in the moment. So, yeah.
Beautiful. A lovely place to stop. I'm afraid we could go on for hours, but
I know.
we have to stop at some point. So
Next week, to be continued next week.
yeah, and I hope anyone listening to this is on their own path of seeking, because an amazing, amazing path to go on. It really is.
It is. It's life can be transformed and
Yeah,
become much more beautiful than I ever imagined it could be.
same here.
I
Thank
wish
you,
that for all
Catherine.
of your. I wish that for all of your listeners, Marion, and for you and I, to continue on that journey. So thank you very much.
Thank you.